Why is it so dark in here? Come on. Turn on. Better. How are you doing? I'm in Scotland for the weekend, and today we're going to discuss one of the most notorious mythological treasures of all time, the magical sword Excalibur. Now, of course, many people know the myth and the folklore around it, but rather than on that, I'd like to focus on the actual story behind the real sword. Where did it come from? Does it still exist today? I don't know. Let's find out. I got to catch a train. Let's go.
The train now approaching platform 2 is the ScotRail service to...
Now, I'm not gonna bother you too much with generic facts and details. Everyone knows the story basically, so I'm just gonna take about 10 seconds to explain it for everyone as a catch-up. Okay, let's go. Enchanted sword is stuck in a rock. People try to pull it out, they fail. Young underdog strolls along, manages to extract said sword from said rock, and
this boy is our king. Well,
sprinkle in some magic along the way for good measure, and you've got yourself some grade A folklore. Good job. The myth has been around for a very long time and has over the years inspired a wide variety of different kinds of media, making the tale of the sword in the stone one of the most famous stories ever known to mankind. Well, that is of course nice, but as with all great stories, there may be a certain fundamental truth to it, in the sense that the sword we call Excalibur actually did exist in real life. This is the real legend of the sword. And it starts with one man.
Well, the story goes that Excalibur was created by the wizard Merlin out of a magical material that gave the sword special powers and made its wielder invincible. Okay, so let's break this down. The wizard Merlin. Wizards, sorry to break it to you, don't actually exist in real life. At least I think so. So who was Merlin actually?
Well, it turns out the greatest wizard of all time, Merlin, was probably a real person, who was not a wizard but part of an equally mystic and secretive community, which were the Druids.
The Druids were considered to be the political and philosophical elite of their time, specifically in this region. It is famously known that they would never write down their knowledge, only passing it on orally to their successors, which caused their mystic reputation in the first place. And what they would do is, they would seek out places like this in nature, where they would perform rituals that may or may not have contained human sacrifice. Which is pleasant, but yeah.
These practices, along with their special bond with nature and their secrecy, must have caused Druids to be perceived as pretty strange or magical to the public. I don't know. To me, the idea of a Druid named Merlin who was just turned into a wizard later on by literature seems pretty plausible.
Okay, getting a little bit more dense over here. Well, okay, so now that we know that, Merlin may have been a druid. But what about the magical material aspect about Excalibur? Well, this is another occasion where the actual story could be potentially even more exciting than the actual myth, because what may have been the case is that during the time an asteroid hit the UK and it was found, and Merlin or someone else took the metal that was contained within the space rock and forged a weapon from it.
Now, if that story is true, then it makes sense why the people at the time considered the sword to have special powers or magical abilities, because Excalibur was literally not from this world. Also, just today, how cool would it be to have a sword made from extraterrestrial material? By the way, if you're wondering about the absence of King Arthur from this video, it has a very simple reason, because in contrast to Excalibur, Arthur did not exist. He's more of a legendary figure, most likely inspired by different Celtic commanders of the 5th and 6th century. It's just a result of the Celtic custom of mixing in historical events with ethical and mythological themes. But here's the thing, it doesn't matter. King Arthur may be important to the fictional narrative, sure, but if we're talking about our history and reality, we now know that about 1500 years ago there likely was someone out there, roaming this very countryside, and actually wielding the legendary Excalibur.
It seems that Excalibur wasn't just a mere figment of myth or imagination, but was just a sword created under very special circumstances. And its unusual origin story just let the human imagination fill in the gaps, and a myth was born. But it does beg the question, where is the actual sword today? Well, in the myth, when King Arthur loses his sword for the first time, the Lady of the Lake grants it back to him. Well, coincidentally, there is an ancient Celtic tradition. Their weapons of their warriors, were considered to be part of them. So when a warrior died, his weapon was usually thrown into a lake.
We can only presume that today Excalibur is located within one of the tens of thousands of lakes in this country, waiting to be found.
So it could actually be the case that the real Excalibur, up to this day, rests undiscovered at the bottom of a lake like this. There are jet skis over there who f up my takes all the time. It's getting dark and I'm kinda tired, but this is fun.